Chapter 13 Fun, Games and Pets Part 1 Often, migrant families share a house until they can save up a bit of money to rent or buy their own place. This is what happened when Theo's younger brother, George, arrived in Hamilton in February of 1961. George was married with a child, a son, Peter. Why did Theo have a son named Peter too? Well, Peter had been the name of Theo's and George's father. This was their way of showing respect for their father by continuing his name. That is what Greek people do. To make a difference between the two Peters, one was called Peter T, after Theo, and the other Peter G, after George. As time passed, Peter T became just plain Peter, but for his cousin, the name Peter G stayed for his whole life. Cousin Peter G and his parents lived with Argiro and Theo for 3 years until they saved up enough money to buy their own house in Goldsmith Street, only a few houses away and down the hill from Peter's house. By the time both Peters were aged 6, they both liked the same things. Both had strong personalities and both liked to have their own way. Not many people in Australia had televisions before the middle of the 1960s. So what did the two Peters and other children do in a small town to pass the time? Well, they made up their own games. Peter, for example, used to like playing with toy cars. One day, his parents gave him a tin fire engine that was about 30 centimetres long. They also gave one exactly the same to Peter G. The two Peters spent many happy hours together making pretend roads in the dirt for their fire engines. Anyway, one day, the two Peters were playing in the old garage in the backyard. One of the fire engines got damaged. No one was sure how it happened. Peter said that it was his cousin's fire engine that was damaged. Of course, Peter G said that his own fire engine was the undamaged one. So they had a big fight and yelled at each other. They both lost their tempers. Both boys had very red faces because they were so angry. Suddenly, Peter took the undamaged truck and started to walk out of the old garage. Peter G did not want to let Peter take the better truck for himself. He wanted to do something to stop him. In the garage, there was an old rusty saw. Cousin Peter took the saw and banged it into the top of Peter's head. Ouch! Peter at once let go of the truck he was holding to touch his sore head and to feel his cuts. He could hear his head inside. It was banging like a drum. Lots of blood was coming out of his head, onto his hair, over his face, and down his neck and shoulders. He forgot about the fire truck. He ran into the house to find his mother, to get help. Vula ran after him. She had seen the whole thing. The kids found Argiro in the kitchen, cooking lunch for them and humming a Greek song to herself. Well, you can imagine the fear on poor Argiro's face. She cried out, "Ah! and then asked what had happened. At the same time, she looked in his hair, trying to find where the blood was coming from. On his head she saw a straight line of holes made by the teeth of the saw. Unluckily, they were quite deep and bleeding a lot. From the amount of blood, and because the saw was old and rusty, Argiro knew it was serious. It could become infected. She had to do something quickly. Argiro couldn't drive, and she didn't have a car. She called out from her kitchen window to her neighbour, Margaret Schmitz. When Margaret put her head out of her own window, Argiro called to her to ring for a taxi to take them to the hospital. Next, she pushed a clean tea towel onto Peter's head and held it there. Then they went outside to wait for the taxi, which arrived very quickly, as Hamilton is a smallish town. The doctor put 10 stitches in Peter's head, gave him an injection, and sent him home to rest. Cousin Peter got a smack on his bottom and was told not to fight again. Peter had to stay inside for a few days with his mother watching him very carefully. The two Peters did some reading, played with their marbles, or made armies with their little green plastic soldiers. Sometimes they laughed and sometimes they argued. Things were back to normal. What do you expect? That's life, isn't it? Vula also had some bad experiences. One winter evening, she was playing near the kitchen stove. It was an old iron stove. On top, it had flat iron plates to cook the family meals. There was also an oven underneath, and right at the bottom were 2 long drawers. In these drawers, Argiro put wet pieces of wood to dry, ready to go into the fire. One evening, Vula opened the bottom drawer so the family's kitten could get in and warm itself up. The kitten often liked to do that. Sadly, Vula forgot all about the kitten and walked away. Someone closed the drawer without seeing the kitten still asleep inside. So the next day, when Argiro bent over to see if there was some dry wood in the drawer, she had a nasty surprise. A dead pussycat. What could she do? It was too late to do anything. The poor little kitten was dead. But there were some other kittens in the garage, and the kids soon made friends with them and felt sad for only a short time. After that, they did not let any cats warm up in the bottom of the drawer. Mother Cat was always busy having kittens and caring for them. She had kittens 2 or 3 times a year. The children learnt that there were other ways cats could die, even without being forgotten in an oven drawer. They learnt they shouldn't touch baby kittens if they were too young to open their eyes. If the kids did touch newborn kittens, then the kittens would grow white, milky stuff in their eyes. After that, sadly, they got very sick and died. The children had to be patient and wait for the kittens to grow and to be able to use their eyes. Then the kittens would be strong enough to stay alive when the children played with them. However, sometimes the children found the kittens so cute they couldn't stop themselves from holding them for just a little while. If they did, then the kittens would die, even after being so greatly loved. It taught the kids self-control.